And this is a topic for another video, but you've made it to where God is a male. And that doesn't even make sense in and of itself, right? So you have a bunch of people following this religion, and the male species have made themselves God, essentially, and it's crumbling now because the younger generation is just like, yeah, no thanks, so it's crumbling now, but it's a lot to think about. It's a lot to think about, right? So even myself now, I say my creator, higher power. I don't go with um him, his, when I'm talking about God, right? So anything that's like male centered, I don't do that, because you see the male logic and how it makes no sense. How can you say God has a gender? Does that make sense to you? So how do you know what gender God is? Did you die? Come back to life to report your findings? You know what I mean? Like when you start thinking about it, you're like, oh, nah. But that's a topic for another video.
Hey, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? Oh, you're just gonna run? You're just gonna run? You're always coming here. I always ask you to help with rent. Oh, it ran before I was able to.
Okay. Underdeveloped frontal lobes. So if you're a pick me, your frontal lobe might be underdeveloped. Actually, that's not even a joke. It's true, because think about what runs your behaviors in your brain. If your frontal lobe isn't fully developed, well, you're going to be fully run by these emotions and fears, right? You're kind of going to be stuck in that zone. Hey, hola, hey, I'm Alex. How are you doing today? So I'm back with another video. So here I really want to talk about something that's really, really important, right? And that's the truth. What's the truth behind this Chinese term? The Chinese term leftover women, right? So what's the truth behind that? Why would you call women leftover women? What's the problem here? And also, that there's a direct correlation between Chinese people calling their own women leftover women, and also between what other countries do, especially countries that are maybe more technologically advanced. You would be surprised, but other countries do all around the world, all around the globe, and they all basically view women as the same thing, right? And so the older women get, they start calling them leftover goods and all type of names, right? Like, so what's the truth behind that? Why do they do that? What's going on? So let's take a look at these videos and we'll go from there. Okay.
The leftover woman is a Chinese term, means a woman who is over 27 years old but unmarried. There are many women who are too old to get married, or they are divorced and nobody wants to marry them. So the problem is that there are more and more leftover women in China and became already a social problem. So, but recent years, people talk less and less about it. Is the problem disappearing? Then you will not like it. Okay, this leftover woman in Chinese is 剩女. This is a very negative word. A woman's value is related to her marriage situation. No matter how much she achieved in other aspects in her life, as long as she reaches a certain age, then she is regarded as leftover and abandoned, and people look down on them. So it shows the kind of discrimination against women in the Chinese marriage market. Men and women are unequal. Women are like a fruit in the market. When they are young and fresh, there are many people who are willing to pay high price to buy them. But when they are after 27, and suddenly they are leftover and not fresh anymore, so people don't want to buy them anymore. And in old time, men always prefer younger girls, right? Now I say it, I observe it very clearly because, when I was 22, 23 years old, and there are many boys who wanted me to be their girlfriend. But a few years later, I became the bigger sister, older sister, and the boys were not around me anymore. They were around the younger sister in the office. But men don't have this problem. They can get older and they are more mature and successful in career, and then become golden bachelor, and nobody likes them. So this very negative attitude against the woman came from last generation. And this negative attitude of last generation came from their last generation. There is a tradition. I give you an example. Mother of one of my friends, she was regarded as a typical leftover woman in her parents' eyes, although back then this word leftover woman didn't exist. But she got married at 28, but when she was young, she was very picky, and she didn't like any guy who wanted to marry her. But when she was about 27, and suddenly she became the burden of the family, and the whole family complained about that, and she suddenly became very anxious. And that's why when she saw an advertisement, marriage advertisement on newspaper, and she immediately answered it, and she looked at it. The guy looked okay, and he had a good job, and then soon later, they get married. That's how she met her husband. So you see, in China, many marriages are similar, like they are not based on a very solid foundation of relationship. And when women get to a certain age, they are anxious, and they can quickly get married. I know many couples, and they get married even less than a year after they met, so it's very quick. So the pressure mostly comes from your family in the last generation. If you didn't get married at a certain age, they just see you as the thorn in the flesh, pain in the ass. And in this festival, which is a very important moment that people celebrate together with the family, and they will criticize you in front of all the people, and that's why many people don't want to go home to meet their parents and their families. And also, where the pressure comes from the society, that they invent this name, leftover woman, to call you this. And it's very not nice to hear that I am leftover woman, nobody wants me, right? Oh, and other pressure is that you just give yourself this pressure because when you see that or your friend, they get married one after the other, and when you see that the girl who is not as beautiful as you, who is not as smart as you, not as successful as you, but have a husband, then you'll be jealous of it, no? And you think, oh my God, so unfair. Why? Where's my husband? When I can have a husband? And I was very deeply influenced by this kind of idea. 10 years ago, I had my life plan that I want to have a child a little bit later than in general at 28, and I will get married before that. But when I was 26, I still didn't get a proper boyfriend, a candidate for husband, and I knew that this plan cannot be fulfilled. But I was not worried so much, and I was not ready for marriage. I think I would like to flirt with more people, and maybe in the future I can find a better person, perfect person. And I could never imagine that I would be left over because I am such an excellent woman. So the reality is like this. The young women, they were very picky when they are young, and they don't rush into making any decision. They choose men. But when they reach a certain age and they want to get married, then it's men's turn to choose a woman. And the older woman gets, the less competitive they are. They have less choice. So there are more men than women. There are more single men than single women in China. But why there are still a lot of leftover women? And correspondingly, there are more leftover men? Because the single men who are left, they came from the lower part of society. No, and the leftover women we talk about, often they have high income and high education. With the development of society, and women get more opportunity, and they are more independent, and they have plenty of time to develop themselves, to focus on their career, to achieve bigger achievement, and they have a lot of hobbies, and they want to marry a guy who have better condition than them or equal. And the men also, they prefer to marry a woman who doesn't have as good condition as them, because somehow the social position determines the position in family. So there are not enough of best men to match the best woman. So in the end, the best women with high income, high education are left. And also the worst men who have low education, little income in countryside are left, and these two groups can never match. They are not compatible. So maybe now we can talk about why there are more men than women in China. So because traditionally people prefer boys than girls, and we have a one-child policy. In order to get a boy, they can kill a girl. When I was in university, I still see a huge propaganda written on the wall that it's forbidden to kill baby girls. I didn't know that this type of thing can happen. Like in 21st century, come on. I was so shocked that it's so common in countryside, people just drown their baby girls in water. Oh my God, that's horrible. Okay, the thing is that we come back to leftover woman. This leftover woman definition is a definition from many years ago. I think nowadays people have a little bit different understanding about this word. 27 years old, they still think it's still young. And 30, okay, you can work on it and you might find a husband. But 35, oh, you should really worry about it because you don't have much choice left to do. And 40 years old, still single, well, basically you are leftover woman. Nobody wants you. You are sentenced to death. So you see that the age are postponed a little bit, and there are more and more leftover women. So people don't think it's an urgent problem. So maybe you will see that the problem seems disappearing, but actually not. So the problem is still here. And yeah, many people still want to get married, but many people already say, oh, I don't care, I can be single and fine. The bigger problem nowadays is that there are more and more young people who don't want to get married at all. And this is a very serious problem, and we're going to talk about it in the future.
Okay, so let's take a look at some of this data here. All right, so the first two definitions and two main points that I need you ladies to understand about the brain is that there's two main parts of the brain that we're going to take a look at, okay, for the purposes of this particular discussion, okay? And the two parts of the brain that we're going to take a look at is the amygdala, and we're going to take a look at the prefrontal cortex, okay? Now let's define these two regions and how they play a role in the patriarchy and the BS that males feed you. Okay, so I want you to see the direct correlation, especially scientifically, as to why males say these things to you. Okay, why they're saying it to you, why a lot of times it has worked and it's not working anymore, and why they continue to try to manipulate you, and the patriarchy continues to try to manipulate you by feeding you this BS, right? Even though it does not make sense, right? So the amygdala, okay, that's that region of the brain, that kind of like turquoise blue region of the brain, that the amygdala is primarily in control of the emotional center of the brain. Okay. The amygdala is the emotional core for passion, impulse, fear, aggression. I'll say that again. It is the emotional core for passion, impulse, fear, and aggression. Okay. Why am I repeating this? Because until you turn a minimum of age 25, guess which part of the brain has almost complete control of all of your behaviors? Guess which part of the brain you're using until your brain fully matures at the age of 25. Your brain fully matures minimally at the age of 25. So there's a range to it. So it's not like, oh, every woman that hits 25, boom, right? So usually it's going to be between the ages of 25 and 28 years old. Your brain will fully mature, right? So guess what's controlling you until that time? Your amygdala. Your amygdala is fully controlling you until that time. And what does that mean? So that means that a lot of your behaviors, most of your behaviors are going to be fully based on the emotional core for passion, impulse, fear, aggression. That's what's going to be leading you. AKA you're immature. You don't know any better. Right? So this is why, ladies, this is why males try to get you young. Okay. Because they're predators and they know this. Okay. They might not know the scientific explanation because most of them aren't bright. They're not smart. Right. But what they do know is that the younger they get you, the easier it is. Okay. So here we're just kind of going through the scientific explanation because ladies can understand the scientific explanations. Males can't. I don't know. They're just not sharp. So, but this is why. Okay, so I need you to understand that there's actually a science, literal science, behind the psychological games that they're playing with you. Okay, so the amygdala is what you're using the entirety of the time before you even have a shot at life. Right? So once your prefrontal cortex is fully developed, which is the main processing, the part of your brain that functions based off of planning and reasoning. Your prefrontal cortex functions based off of planning and reasoning. Listen to my words carefully, ladies. Okay. Planning and reasoning, okay, is the prefrontal cortex, and that is not fully developed until a minimum of 25 years old. So now you see why, for example, in Chinese cultures, they call them leftover women if you're not married by the age of 27. How convenient. So they want you to have an owner, aka a husband. They want you to have an owner prior to you reaching the age of maturity. You need to understand these things. You have to understand these things. So let's take a look at some more data here, okay? Let's see. All right, so let's use data from the National Library of Medicine. And this is actually a research that was done on the development of the brain in the different areas and time frames at which the brain develops. So the brain has different areas and each area develops in its own time frame. Okay, like we've talked about, the amygdala rules the emotional center of the brain. The prefrontal cortex is the reasoning center of the brain. You do not have that. Ladies, minimally until the age of 25. Actually, for me, I think it hit me around 27 to 28 years old. And before then, I couldn't really function optimally, right? So I had to really just pick one major thing that I felt like could help me, and which was schooling, right? So I was like, well, pretty good at that. I'll stick to that, and I'm glad I did that because everything else, I would have not been able to appropriately reason through because my brain wasn't fully developed yet. Or I should say my prefrontal cortex was not developed yet. Okay. So let's take a look at this here. Okay. So behavioral control requires a great involvement of cognitive and executive functions, right? These functions are localized in the prefrontal cortex. I'll read that again. Behavioral control. So for you might feel like and think you have control of your behaviors, but you don't. Okay. So for you, women, to have any chance of having full control over your own behavior, your prefrontal cortex has to be developed in your brain because that is the part of your brain that will assess that situation and make that decision for you. Okay. Now, that part of your brain does not develop prior to the age of 25. This research says 24. And the reason this research says 24 is because it's kind of a range. And so with this research, they have like a bunch of studies or test subjects, individuals that they tested, and they kind of average it out somewhat, right, to kind of come up with a number. So this is the research study, but you're going to find that it's kind of a range, and it's typically going to be around that 25 to 28-year-old range. If you catch it at 24 earlier, then, you must be really, really sharp, right? Because if I'm being serious, environmental factors do play a role. So substance abuse, for example, if you're using marijuana at a young age, if you're smoking at a young age, if you're a so your environmental factors will play a role as to how quickly your prefrontal cortex and any other area in your brain develops, or how slowly, conversely, right? So anyway, just understand that this is around the age that they tell you that you're going to be left over. Okay, listen to me carefully. Coincides, because you'll hear some males say 25, you'll hear some males say 30, you'll hear some males say 27, right? All around, how convenient that those ages are all around the age where your brain fully matures and develops when it comes to cognitive reasoning and full behavioral control. How convenient is that, right? So these functions are localized in the prefrontal cortex, which matures independently of puberty and continues to evolve until the age of 24 years of age. It has been suggested that during this period, adolescents should not be overprotected, but be allowed to make mistakes, learn from their own experiences and practices of self-regulation. So, that's parenting advice. I don't have any kids, so I guess that goes more into parenting. And I kind of agree. I agree. One of the mistakes a lot of parents make is they overprotect the child, and oftentimes it does not work out to their advantage. But it's hard to say because there's so many personality factors also involved with that. But I digress, right? So let's take a look at some more data. Okay, so here we are on the NHNSCR website. Okay, it's a scientific website, and let's take a look at what this says. How developed is the brain at age 21? By the age of 21, most of the structural development of the human brain is complete. However, the frontal lobe, which is responsible for executive functions such as decision-making, planning, and inhibitory control, continues to develop until the mid-20s. Okay? This period of development is crucial for shaping one's personality, decision-making abilities, and behaviors. Okay? That's why the current patriarchy is so disgusting to me, because everywhere you go, women are being pushed to be married in teenage years prior to ever even having a chance. By age 20, 21, 22, 23, they're being pushed to essentially have an owner, right? Because you get attached to this individual and you don't even know who you are, right? And so they're trying to prey on you because they know that the younger you are, right? The younger you are, the easier that will be to do, the easier it will be to take full control of you. Okay. You need to understand this so you don't fall prey. Okay. So this is the reason why. This is why every time you hear the male species come with their idiocracy, oh, you're leftover, you're 30. The reason they're saying that, meanwhile, 30-year-old and up, you'll get hit on all day long. These males don't care. You think they have cognitive functioning that allows them to logically distinguish between, they don't care. They'll stick it in anything and everything. They will stick it in everything and anything. They don't care how old you are. They literally don't care. This is a form of manipulation and control because they're so desperate to maintain control that they no longer have, right? And they're just struggling to accept this fact. You don't have the control anymore. Women are too uncomfortable. They aren't even birthing your children. What you've created here, this patriarchy, is not working. All the bills are going up. People are having to pay more. Poor people are having to work even more. No one's going to have no kids underneath this nonsense. And since you take the credit, you're the one that wants to take the credit for creating this, right? Well, this is your fault. Okay, so there you go. So let's see what affects the frontal lobe development. Remember how we talked about and how I said and I told you, hey, this kind of functions on a range, but around the same time frame. You're looking at around that. Usually, typically, it's going to be around that 25 to 27, 28-year-old range. Could happen at 24. Just kind of depends on your environment. So, this kind of talks a little bit about that. The frontal lobe development can be impacted by a wide range of factors, including genetics, environment, and experiences. For me, it was around 27, 28, and I kid you not, y'all. It was like a light switch. It was weird. When I say it was like this, it was the most surreal experience, and it was random. I was about to I think I was about to like turn off the light or something, and it was like I just paused. Like I froze, and it was like someone just flipped the light switch in my head, and I felt like try to explain what it felt like. It felt like the life I had been living until then wasn't my own. It was weird. It felt like I had just woken up from some kind of dream, and I was like, what have I been doing with my life this whole time? Like, why was I doing that? And why was I doing that? And that doesn't make sense. It was so weird for me. That was my experience with it. I think what ladies have different experiences. So leave it in the comments below. I would love to hear your experiences, but it was insane when it happened to me. And that's when I was like, and before that, I didn't even know anything about this. And I was like, okay, what's going on here? And so this is why they want to push you to do it as early as possible. Okay, so don't fall prey to it. But yeah, so frontal lobe development can be impacted by a wide range of factors, including genetics, environment, and experiences. Studies have shown that a lack of stimulation and neglect in childhood can lead to underdeveloped frontal lobes. So the extent of your frontal lobe, or sorry, your frontal lobe development does have a lot to do with your environment and other factors. So other factors such as alcohol, I talked about that, told you. So anyways, other factors such as alcohol, substance abuse, sleep deprivation, get your sleep, head injuries can also affect frontal lobe development negatively. So ladies, stop dating these males, because the more stress you put yourself under, okay, that's going to affect your sleep, that's going to affect your functioning, and males will bully you. They like control, especially if you're young. So they'll play a lot of psychological games with you. They like disappearing for 3 days and then showing back up out of nowhere, right? Or saying, "Oh, it's your fault. Oh no, that never happened." When you know that you could remember it. I'm like, I'm not crazy. I'm not losing my mind. I know that happened. I remember that happened. But they're like gaslighting you. Don't put yourself underneath that stress, because that's inevitably going to affect the overall development of your brain. Okay, then you're going to get to the age where you're supposed to be enjoying the most, because now you have full control, right? Because your prefrontal cortex is getting to the point where it's fully developed, and you're going to stagnate that development. Okay. And then you're going to be stuck in a place where behaviorally, a lot of your behaviors are based on fears, emotions, and it's going to be very, very hard for you to get out of that space, right? So at what age, well, we went through this, right? The frontal lobe's development process is not linear. It's not linear, right? And it can vary depending on the individual's genetic makeup, environment, and experiences. According to research, though, the frontal lobe is not fully developed until the mid-20s, with some studies suggesting that it can continue to develop into the early 30s. It really can. So depending on all of these factors, right? Typically, most of the time, I would say, for a lot of the research that I've read, it comes out to around that 27 to 28 age range. But yeah, you could 30, 31, so give yourself a chance. Don't fall prey to the male species. Let's take a look here. Oh, that's interesting. How do you know if your frontal lobe is underdeveloped? Well, an underdeveloped frontal lobe can manifest in several ways. One of the most common signs of an underdeveloped frontal lobe is impulsivity. See what I'm telling you? See what I just said? If you don't give yourself the chance, you're gonna be stuck in the zone, and because something has to rule. So if it's not going to be your prefrontal cortex, then it's going to be your amygdala. And what is your amygdala? Well, your amygdala functions primarily based on emotions and not positive emotions. Okay, it functions based on things like fear, right? Impulsivity, right? So if you're impulsive, you got some work to do, right? So where an individual struggles to inhibit their actions and make good decisions. Okay. So you have an underdeveloped prefrontal lobe if that's happening, potentially. So other symptoms may include poor planning, difficulty with problem solving, a lack of emotional control, and difficulty with task initiation. All right, ladies, be careful. This has very, very bad long-term repercussions for women, and males don't care. They do not care. They do not care about any of this, right? So they try to force you to do things prior to this age of 25, and they try to talk down on women that are after the age of 25 and then did not fall prey to this. Okay. And this is the reason why. Okay. So that's kind of where we're at, right? So this is basically just saying that it's not the whole brain doesn't develop at the age of 25. Each part of the brain develops in its own timeline and its own time frame, right? So the prefrontal cortex is part of the frontal lobe, and it plays a critical role in cognitive functioning, such as planning, decision making, and impulse control. It is responsible for setting and achieving goals, solving problems, and exhibiting appropriate social behaviors. Yeah, exactly. All right, ladies. So there you have it. Some more data for you, some more information. Like, leave it in the comments below, because this was super important for me to get out, because OMG, the rate at which this predators, it's like, man, good Lord. And they, they'll just prey on young women. The younger, the better. That's why even in Hollywood, perfect example, they go for teenagers and younger. This is why. This is why. And I don't know what to say, because it's a direct reflection on the society that they claim that they've created. And I don't know what the point of creating such a society is, where your species literally doesn't serve a purpose, right? You're harming children, you're harming women, you don't care about the earth, you're not taking care of Mother Earth, right? Comments below, let me know what you think. Don't forget to smash that like button for me. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button for me, okay? And I will see y'all in the next one. Bye.